9 a.m. Tehran lay frozen under a heavy winter gray. Inside the Majlis, a highly classified meeting of the highest priority was in session. The Iranian Minister of Defense sat across from his North Korean counterparts, surrounded by technical advisors and encrypted tablets. They were finalizing the deployment protocols for a new hypersonic glide vehicle code named Molia V, described as having an unpredictable trajectory and a yield capable of erasing a metropolitan center in seconds. The room was sealed, air gapped, and protected by the most advanced active denial systems. Yet outside the chamber, Tel Aviv was watching. A stealth, high-altitude reconnaissance asset loitered in the stratosphere, recording the thermal signatures of the attendees and transmitting data packets via burst transmission to Israeli command. The leak was catastrophic. What was intended as a secret strategic pivot became open intelligence in moments. The digital files contained technical schematics, supply chains for solid fuel components, and transcripts that read like an ultimatum. In Tel Aviv, the Prime Minister and his general staff moved from analysis to execution. The question was no longer about diplomacy, but about survival. They had to neutralize the program before the prototype could leave the ground. The mood in Tehran was arrogant. The tone inside the meeting was triumphant. But the veil of secrecy had already been shredded. The stage was set for a kinetic collision. 9:18 a.m. Tel Aviv received the confirmation and authorized the strike package. The Prime Minister convened the War Cabinet while intelligence officers briefed the room in plain English. The options narrowed to a single imperative, which was to destroy the command node and expose the vulnerability of the capital. Commanders activated a response built on saturation and technological asymmetry. The plan called for a massive layered deployment of autonomous systems and next-generation electronic warfare assets designed to blind the adversary and exhaust their magazines. The force assembled was unprecedented and described in Tel Aviv as a swarm array. The package included 50 jet-powered decoy drones acting as bait, 40 advanced Scorpius-G electronic warfare units configured for deep area suppression, and 200 strike assets. These strike assets included the new Harop kamikaze drones, long-range Hero 120 loitering munitions, and AI-piloted interceptors that could navigate without GPS. Support elements included underwater unmanned vehicles targeting power cables in the river, and sabotage teams triggering cyber attacks on the municipal grid. The objective was total denial of command capability. Decision-makers accepted the high cost. Each Harop unit cost significantly less than the cruise missiles they hunted, while swarms of AI-guided FPV drones represented a terrifying economy of scale. The planners in Tel Aviv framed the operation as a lesson in modern attrition. The goal was to force the opponent to fire million-dollar interceptors at cheap plastic decoys and to overload the fire control computers. Publicly, the Israeli government remained silent. Privately, the orders were absolute. Allies were notified through secure back channels. Legal teams prepared arguments of anticipatory self-defense. On the technical side, the plan relied on millisecond synchronization. Electronic warfare platforms were intended to white out the search radars and sever the data links between the Bavar 373 batteries and their command posts. Decoy flights would mimic the radar cross-section of IAF F-35 fighters to confuse the operators. The main strike wave would leverage terminal velocity and optical guidance systems that did not rely on satellites, allowing them to penetrate heavy jamming. Commanders rehearsed for chaos. Rules of engagement strictly forbade targeting residential blocks, but accepted collateral damage to government infrastructure. Medical teams were placed on high alert outside Tel Aviv to manage the expected retaliatory strikes. The political calculus was ruthless. Tel Aviv prepared a narrative that framed the operation as a preemptive strike against a weapon of mass destruction. Briefings emphasized that the Molia V represented an existential threat, and that the Majlis meeting was the final authorization for its use. Media teams readied press releases while diplomats worked the phones to ensure Western capitals would not panic. Logistics and attrition calculations were precise. The operation accepted that 80% of the drones might be shot down. The remaining 20% were enough to deliver a strategic blow. Planners estimated that degrading the adversary's decision-making loop by even a few hours would disrupt the entire regional offensive. The commanders signed the execution order with cold hands. They knew this was a gamble between immediate escalation and slow strangulation. The operation launched. Data links hummed. Propellers spun. Jet engines ignited. The clock ran down. Is North Korea deliberately using the Iranian capital as a proving ground for its own nuclear ambitions? 9:30 a.m. The first wave arrived like a ghost fleet. A swarm of jet-powered decoys appeared on every radar screen in the Tehran defense district. It was a mass signal that flooded the scopes and triggered automatic engagement protocols. Iranian Bavar 373 and upgraded 3rd Khordad batteries near the city limits reacted instantly. They launched a volley of 20 interceptor missiles at hypersonic speeds. Flame trails scarred the winter sky. Missiles flying at Mach 6 slammed into the decoys. Debris rained down on the frozen forests north of the city. The decoys had done their job. They had forced the defense to reveal its positions and expend its ready ammunition. Then the electronic warfare trap snapped shut. Advanced jamming pods on the second wave activated simultaneous noise barriers. In seconds, the radar screens of the 3rd Khordad crews turned to static snow. Optical sensors were blinded by laser dazzlers. The entire integrated air defense network fractured into isolated units unable to talk to one another. The main strike wave descended from the zenith. 20 Harop kamikaze drones and 30 Hero 120 loitering munitions dove at terminal velocity. They approached from all directions. 3 were hit by lucky gunfire. 10 missed due to wind shear. But the rest found their mark. The attack was a cascade of kinetic energy. Drones adjusted their fins, locked onto the building outline using optical recognition, and slammed into the structure. The first direct hit struck the heavy oak doors of the Majlis main entrance. The warhead punched through the reinforcement and detonated inside the grand foyer. The blast wave shattered every window on the ground floor and sent a shockwave up the elevator shafts. Marble columns cracked and fell. The heat was intense enough to melt the aluminum frames of the security scanners. Seconds later, 2 Harop kamikaze drones struck the roof directly above the assembly hall. The reinforced concrete gave way under the dual impact. The ceiling disintegrated. Tons of debris, steel beams, and glass crashed down into the meeting room. The dust cloud was instant and suffocating in the secure basement. The lights flickered and died as the main power lines were severed. Backup generators failed to kick in due to the cyber attack running in parallel. Smoke filled the tactical situation room. 9:37 a.m. satellite feeds showed thermal blooms erupting from the center of the government district. The dome of the building sagged and then collapsed inward. It was a progressive structural failure. A seismic sensor in the suburbs registered the impact as a ground tremor. Shock waves shattered shop windows 3 streets away. Car alarms wailed in a discordant chorus across the entire district. 9:40 a.m. secondary fires ignited from ruptured gas mains. The temperature inside the north wing spiked to levels that softened structural steel. Emergency systems tried to activate, but the control lines were dead. For 11 minutes, the Tehran High Command had no idea if the defense minister was alive or dead. The chain of command was broken. First responders trying to reach the site were blocked by their own automated perimeter defenses, which had gone into lockdown mode. Casualty extraction was a nightmare of smoke and confusion. Medics worked in the dark using red tactical lights. They pulled survivors from the rubble and treated blast lung and flash burns. The forensic picture was one of precision devastation. The main chamber was gone. The files on Molia were buried under tons of concrete, on the roof. The impact craters were perfectly placed to maximize structural damage. 9:50 a.m. external imagery showed the Majlis venting black smoke into the cold January air. International news channels interrupted their programming to show the live feed. The material damage was absolute. The political damage was worse. The Iranian military had failed to protect its own center of power. The psychological immunity of the capital was gone. The tally of losses included millions of dollars in drone hardware. But the exchange rate was favorable for Tel Aviv. They had traded plastic and chips for a strategic pause. The battlefield had expanded to the heart of the decision-making center. Commanders on both sides looked at the maps and realized the rules of war had changed forever. By noon, state media was playing classical music. The Majlis stood as a hollowed-out shell. Rescue teams recovered the burned remains of the classified Molyaviv documents. The secret was not just leaked, it was buried across Iran. The mood shifted from confidence to uncertainty. Recruitment centers locked their doors. Inside the remaining secure bunkers, commanders watched the replay of the strike in silence. The attack had avoided the civilian streets and struck the brain of the state with the precision of a surgeon. That afternoon in Tel Aviv, there were no parades. Engineers sat in dark rooms reviewing the telemetry data. Each hit was verified. Each failure was noted for the next iteration. The message from Israel was silent but deafening. If you plan to burn our cities, expect your own roof to fall on your head. The world had witnessed a new era of warfare where calibration matters more than yield. Peace is not merely the absence of gunfire, but the presence of restful sleep. For too long, the skies over the Middle East have been torn apart by the smoke trails of missiles instead of the flight of birds. The fields, which are symbols of life and hope, have buckled under the weight of tanks and trenches. We call for peace, not only to end the destruction, but to protect the right of a young generation to grow up. No victory built on ruins can ever be sustainable. Let diplomacy replace bullets and let handshakes replace detonators. The world needs a peaceful Middle East, and Israel needs the world to understand. It must stop. The past has held enough pain, and the future needs to be healed.